Ladies and gentlemen, let's not sugarcoat it. Respect is not given, it is earned. And even when it's earned, it can be lost in a moment. In a world that's louder than ever, where titles are mistaken for authority and popularity often confuses itself with influence, one truth remains: respect is the quiet power that outlasts attention. And here's the part we rarely talk about. You don't gain respect just by what you add to your life. You gain it by what you're willing to remove. Today I want to reveal 6 habits that silently sabotage your respect, and 2 bonus truths that amplify the message. These aren't just behaviors. They are barriers between you and the version of yourself that commands real respect, the kind that's felt, not forced. So let's dive in, not with judgment, but with clarity. Because once you remove these, the world doesn't just notice you, it listens. Now let's talk about one of the most subtle but damaging habits that destroy the foundation of respect: making excuses. On the surface, it looks innocent. After all, life is unpredictable, and things don't always go as planned. But when excuses become your default response to every missed goal, failed commitment, or broken promise, something much deeper is happening. You are silently convincing yourself and others that you are powerless, and nothing drains respect faster than that. We all know people who always have a reason why they couldn't show up, why the deadline slipped, why the dream never took shape. The weather, their upbringing, their manager, the system. It's always something or someone else. But here's the brutal truth: every excuse you make chips away at your credibility. Not just in the eyes of others, but even more dangerously in your own eyes. When you let yourself off the hook over and over, you teach yourself not to believe in your own word. And when that internal trust erodes, confidence and self-respect go with it. People respect those who own their story, not just the highlight reel, but the setbacks too. There's incredible strength in someone who says, yes, I failed. Yes, I made a mistake, but I own it. And I'm doing something about it. That kind of honesty doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. And being real is the birthplace of being respected. Making excuses feels safe. It protects your ego in the short term, gives you something to lean on when things fall apart. But it also cages you, because as long as it's someone else's fault, you never have to change. And if you never change, you never grow. And if you never grow, you'll always be stuck explaining why your life looks the same year after year. That's a life that might get sympathy, but it will never get respect. People watch more than they listen. They see how you respond to failure, to adversity, to your own shortcomings. When they see you take ownership, even when it's uncomfortable, they lean in. They start to trust your character, not just your words. And that trust is the beginning of deep, lasting respect. So if you want to be taken seriously, if you want people to look at you and say, that's someone I believe in, then start by cutting off the habit of excuses at the root. Take responsibility. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Because the moment you stop explaining why you can't and start showing how you will, everything begins to change, including the way the world sees you. When you speak about others behind their backs, you might think you're just sharing. You might think you're bonding, venting, or harmlessly passing time. But what's really happening on a deeper level is the slow erosion of your own credibility. Gossip is seductive. It makes you feel like you're on the inside, like you're in control of a conversation, like you're seen and heard. But the truth is, every time you talk about someone who isn't there to defend themselves, you reveal more about yourself than you ever do about them. There's an emotional cost to gossiping that most people never notice until it's too late. It feels good in the moment. It creates connection, or so we believe. But it's a false kind of closeness built on tearing others down. And anything built on destruction can never earn respect. People might laugh with you, they might nod and listen. But deep down, they're making a note. They're asking themselves, if they speak this way about them, what will they say about me when I walk away? That seed of doubt is all it takes to weaken trust. And without trust, respect doesn't stand a chance. True respect is built in the silences, in the moments when you have the choice to tear someone down and instead you choose not to. It's built when you hold someone's reputation with care, even when they're not in the room. Especially when they're not in the room. Because that's when integrity is tested, not when people are watching, but when they're not. The irony of gossip is that it always backfires. You might think you're gaining favor, that you're showing someone you're in the know. But what you're really doing is telling them you're unsafe, that you can't be trusted with private thoughts, that you find power in exposure rather than discretion. And while people may smile, something in them begins to pull back. Respect is not just about being liked, it's about being trusted. It's about others knowing they're safe in your presence, that their name won't be weaponized the moment they leave the room. It takes strength to walk away from gossip. It takes restraint to shut it down when others start it. But every time you do, you reinforce a powerful message that you are someone who protects people, not exposes them. That you value honesty over drama, loyalty over popularity. And in a world where gossip is often masked as entertainment, being someone who refuses to participate is quietly radical. When you choose to speak directly rather than behind someone's back, you model courage. When you choose to listen without passing judgment, you model empathy. And when you choose silence over slander, you model wisdom. These are the traits that earn respect, not because they make noise, but because they build trust. And in the long run, trust is louder than gossip will ever be. So if you want to be respected, don't let your words betray others. Use them to elevate, not to diminish. Speak in ways that make people feel safe, even in their absence. Because in the end, it's not what you say when people are watching that defines you. It's what you say when they're not. There's something deeply human about wanting others to see our pain. We all go through seasons of struggle, and in those moments, it's natural to crave comfort, support, and understanding. But there's a delicate line between sharing your struggles and building your identity around them. When difficulty becomes the lens through which you see everything, when every conversation is laced with a sense of injustice, when your challenges become a badge you wear rather than a burden you're overcoming, you slowly slip into the role of the victim. And while you may receive sympathy, respect quietly walks out the door. The truth is, life is unfair. Some people start further back than others. Some carry heavier burdens. Some are hurt in ways they never deserved. But the world doesn't respect you because you've been hurt. It respects you because of what you do after the hurt. Respect isn't handed to the one who shouts the loudest about their wounds. It's drawn to the one who rises despite them. There's something incredibly powerful about a person who has every reason to give up, every reason to be bitter, every reason to point fingers, and chooses not to. When you stay in the victim mindset, you unconsciously give your power away. You place your happiness, your progress, your self-worth in the hands of others, blaming, resenting, waiting. But what if the very thing you're waiting for, validation, redemption, acknowledgement, won't ever come from outside you? What if it has to be claimed, not granted? The moment you stop seeing yourself as someone who life is happening to and start seeing yourself as someone who can shape life through response, resilience, and resolve, something inside you shifts. You stop asking for pity and start commanding respect. Not through ego, but through example. It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's not about burying your pain or being emotionless. It's about owning your story without letting it own you. It's about being able to say, yes, I went through hell, but I didn't unpack and live there. That level of inner strength speaks volumes. It tells others that you are not defined by your scars, but refined by them. That you are not a victim of your story, but the author of its next chapter. People admire courage, not complaint. They're drawn to those who transform pain into purpose. The ones who don't just talk about how hard it was, but show what they learned, how they grew, and what they're building now. That kind of presence is magnetic. It challenges others to be better without saying a word. And it earns a level of respect that no title, no status, no accomplishment can replicate. So if you've been through pain, honor it. If you're still healing, that's okay. But don't build a throne in your suffering. Don't let your past become your identity. Let it become your proof that even when life broke you down, you stood back up. Not for applause, not for attention, but because you were never meant to stay down. You were meant to rise. And people respect those who rise. The desire to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be validated, it's one of the most fundamental human needs. From the time we're children, we learn to associate approval with safety, praise with worth, attention with love. But somewhere along the way, for some people, that need evolves into something more fragile and consuming. It becomes a dependency. And when your self-worth becomes tied to the applause of others, your identity becomes a performance instead of a truth. The tragedy of constantly seeking validation is that you lose your own voice in the process of trying to echo everyone else's approval. It's a quiet kind of prison, the need to be validated. You post something online and check back every few minutes to see who noticed. You make a decision not based on what feels right, but based on what will impress. You walk into a room scanning for approval instead of walking in with grounded purpose. And while the world may momentarily applaud you, something deeper begins to starve. Because no amount of external validation can fill the void left by internal uncertainty. You start relying on likes, compliments, promotions, and praise just to feel like you matter. But the moment the applause fades, and it always does, you're left wondering who you are when no one is watching. People don't respect someone who's constantly performing for approval. They may compliment them, they may be entertained by them, but deep respect doesn't live in a place where authenticity is missing. Respect grows in the soil of self-assurance. It grows when people sense that you know who you are, even if no one is clapping. When you don't need to be constantly affirmed to stay consistent. When your values stay steady regardless of whether anyone agrees. There's something profoundly powerful about someone who is content in their own skin, who shows up with quiet confidence rather than desperate energy. These people don't dominate conversations, yet their presence is commanding. They don't overshare, yet their words carry weight. They don't chase attention, and somehow it still follows them. Because real power isn't loud, and respect doesn't chase. It's drawn. When you free yourself from the need to be constantly validated, you begin to move with integrity instead of insecurity. You stop making choices based on what looks good and start making them based on what feels true. You stop bending yourself into versions of what others want and start standing taller in the version that's honest. And the incredible thing is that the moment you no longer need respect to validate you is often the very moment people begin to offer it to you freely. So much energy is wasted trying to be impressive. But what truly impresses people isn't how many are watching you. It's how few you need to be okay. When you are rooted in your own worth, not swayed by praise or rejection, you give others permission to do the same. And in that space, not only do you command respect, you become someone who helps others find it within themselves too. There's a quiet fear that many people carry, the fear of confrontation, the fear of discomfort, the fear of saying something that might not be received well. So instead, they stay silent. They nod when they disagree. They avoid hard conversations, telling themselves it's kindness, it's diplomacy, it's keeping the peace. But in reality, it's avoidance. And the longer you avoid the truth, the more you betray both yourself and those around you. Avoiding difficult conversations doesn't preserve harmony. It slowly poisons it. And while it may protect you from tension in the short term, it costs you respect in the long run. People can sense when something needs to be said and isn't. They may not call it out directly, but they feel it in the undercurrent of every interaction. Trust begins to erode. Authenticity takes a hit. And instead of real connection, you're left with surface-level comfort that feels safe but lacks depth. We often underestimate how much people respect honesty, not the kind that wounds, but the kind that's rooted in courage and clarity. Difficult conversations are not about being aggressive or confrontational. They are about being honest enough to say what needs to be said, even when your voice trembles. Respect isn't built through silence. It's built through truth. And truth, when spoken with integrity, is never cruel. It might be uncomfortable. It might be unwelcome. But it is essential. When you choose to speak up, to set boundaries, to address conflict instead of running from it, you show others and yourself that you value growth over ease. That you care enough to risk being misunderstood in order to preserve something real. That you are strong enough to carry the weight of discomfort because authenticity matters more to you than approval. There's a certain power that comes from standing in a hard conversation and refusing to shrink. It doesn't require shouting. It doesn't demand dominance. It simply asks that you stay present, that you speak with clarity, and that you listen with openness. When people see that in you, they trust you more. They know you won't say one thing to their face and another behind their back. They know you're not driven by fear, but by principle. And that earns a kind of respect that's deep and lasting. The avoidance of difficult conversations often stems from a desire to be liked. But being liked and being respected are not the same. Being liked can come from being agreeable. Being respected comes from being authentic. You may not always say what others want to hear. You may disappoint, unsettle, or even anger someone by speaking your truth. But you'll be seen. You'll be known. And over time, you'll be trusted because you've shown that your words are not just convenient, but consistent. And that consistency is what earns respect. If you want to lead, to inspire, to have influence that lasts, you must be willing to say the hard things, not recklessly, not selfishly, but truthfully. Your silence may protect you from conflict, but it also protects you from connection. Say what needs to be said. Your voice, used wisely, is your most powerful tool. And when you learn to use it, not to hurt, but to heal, not to dominate, but to define, you become someone others can follow, someone they can trust, someone they respect. There is something quietly destructive about the habit of overpromising and under-delivering. It often starts with good intentions. You want to be helpful, supportive, impressive even. You say yes quickly, assure others you've got it covered, paint a picture of reliability and competence. But then life happens. Time slips away, deadlines creep in, the energy fades, and the promise, once made so confidently, is left unfulfilled. You may think people will understand, that they'll remember the intention more than the result, but they don't. People remember what you do, not what you meant to do. And every time you fail to follow through, something small but important begins to break your credibility. Respect is not built on charm. It is built on consistency. It is one thing to inspire people with your words, but it is an entirely different thing to back those words with action. When you repeatedly say yes, but fail to deliver, people stop trusting your word. And when trust erodes, respect doesn't just fade, it disappears. What's worse is that often the people who overpromise are also the ones who are most desperate to be seen as capable. But the very behavior meant to impress ends up doing the opposite. It creates disappointment, frustration, and eventually disconnection. There's a deeper issue beneath the surface. Overpromising is not just about saying yes too much. It's about the inability to say no. It's about fearing how you'll be perceived if you don't take on more. It's rooted in a desire to be liked, to be needed, to feel indispensable. But the irony is that the more you say yes to please others, the more you risk letting them down. And people would rather have someone who sets honest limits and follows through than someone who agrees to everything but delivers on nothing. There is tremendous strength in learning to manage expectations instead of inflating them. When you say what you mean and mean what you say, even if it's less than what others hoped for, you become someone they can count on. That reliability earns trust. That trust earns respect. And that respect builds the kind of influence that doesn't need loud declarations or exaggerated promises. It speaks for itself. Being respected doesn't mean doing everything. It means doing what you said you would do. Not sometimes, not when it's convenient, but consistently. And if life gets in the way, and sometimes it will, own it. Communicate. Take responsibility. That too earns respect. Because people understand imperfection. What they don't tolerate is avoidance, silence, or excuses. So slow down before you say yes. Measure your words carefully. Don't let your need to be liked outweigh your ability to be reliable. Be the person whose name carries weight, not because it's always in the spotlight, but because it always delivers. Respect is not given to those who promise the most. It's given to those who keep their word even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. There is a subtle but powerful form of self-sabotage that often goes unnoticed, and it's the habit of constantly comparing yourself to others. It can sneak in quietly when you scroll through social media and see someone else's success, when a friend shares good news about their life, when a colleague receives recognition you've long hoped for. In those moments, your inner critic awakens, whispering that you're behind, that you're not enough, that your efforts don't measure up. And just like that, your sense of worth begins to erode, not because of what you lack, but because of what you perceive others to have. Comparison distorts your vision. It makes you forget your journey, your growth, your uniqueness. It pulls your attention away from your own path and plants it firmly on someone else's. And in doing so, it disconnects you from your purpose. It's impossible to stay grounded when your focus is always drifting towards someone else's lane. You begin to chase goals that aren't yours, imitate voices that aren't yours, and eventually lose sight of who you truly are. And while this may gain you attention or admiration, it will never earn you real respect, because respect requires authenticity. There is nothing admirable about being a replica of someone else. The world doesn't respect those who simply echo success. It respects those who create something from within. Your value doesn't increase or decrease based on where others are in their lives. Respect doesn't come from being better than someone. It comes from being better than you were yesterday. But when you live in comparison, your progress feels invisible. Your wins feel small and your journey feels unworthy. You stop acknowledging how far you've come because you're too busy looking at how far someone else seems to be. The truth is, no one's life is as perfect as it appears. Everyone is carrying silent battles, facing private doubts, questioning their worth in quiet moments. What you see on the surface is rarely the full story. And yet, comparison tricks you into thinking you're the only one who struggles, the only one who's uncertain, the only one who's behind. It isolates you in your own mind and convinces you that you're losing a race that doesn't even exist. But there's a shift that happens when you begin to focus inward instead of outward. When you stop measuring your worth against someone else's timeline and start honoring your own, you become grounded, clear, confident. And that inner stillness is powerful. People are drawn to those who know who they are and who move through the world without needing to compete. That quiet confidence commands more respect than any spotlight ever could. So stop letting comparison distract you from your own growth. Stop allowing it to diminish your light. You don't need to be more like anyone else to be worthy of respect. You need only to be more like the truest version of yourself. Because when you're rooted in your own identity, you stop chasing respect and start becoming the kind of person who naturally receives it. There is a quiet but undeniable strength in having personal standards. Not rules for others, but values you hold yourself to, especially when no one is watching. And yet many people go through life without defining these standards for themselves. They react instead of reflect. They follow the crowd, adjust to the room, shift depending on who they're with. They live by circumstance instead of by conviction. And while they may fit in easily, they rarely stand out in a way that commands respect. Because deep respect isn't given to those who merely adapt. It's given to those who live with intention. Living without personal standards is like sailing without a compass. You might move, but you drift. You might be busy, but you're directionless. And in that constant state of motion, something is always missing. You start measuring your actions based on convenience rather than principle. What feels good in the moment replaces what's right in the long term. You cut corners, ignore red flags, say yes when you mean no, or stay silent when your voice is needed. Slowly your integrity begins to fade, not through one big decision, but through a series of small compromises. And with every compromise, a little of your self-respect slips away. And when you stop respecting yourself, others can feel it. Whether they know it consciously or not, they respond to it. Respect isn't just about how others treat you, it's about how they witness you treating yourself. When you set high standards for how you speak, how you show up, how you treat others, and how you respond under pressure, you send a message without ever needing to say a word. That message is clarity. That message is stability. That message is integrity. People may not always agree with you, but they know where you stand. They know you're not easily swayed by opinion, not driven by applause, not shaped by fear. And that consistency builds trust. That trust becomes respect. Not the fleeting kind that comes from popularity, but the lasting kind that comes from character. Having personal standards doesn't mean being rigid or self-righteous. It means being grounded. It means knowing what matters to you. Honesty, kindness, discipline, responsibility, and holding yourself to those values even when no one else does. Especially when no one else does. It's easy to live with standards when it's convenient. But the real test is whether you hold them when it costs you something. When it would be easier to cut corners or stay quiet or blend in. That's when your character is revealed. That's when real respect is earned. When you live with personal standards, you don't just influence people, you inspire them. You show them what's possible when someone leads themselves first. And that's the kind of presence that makes a lasting impact. The kind that people trust. The kind that doesn't have to demand respect because it lives in a way that naturally commands it. Not through image, but through integrity. Not through control, but through consistency. Not through perfection, but through purpose. Excuses are easy. They are comfortable, familiar, and instantly available. When something goes wrong, when you fall short, when you don't meet your own expectations, the mind races to find something or someone to blame. It might be the situation, the timing, the people around you, your upbringing, or the lack of support. And for a moment, making that excuse feels like relief. It shields you from the sting of failure. But what it also does, quietly and persistently, is erode your personal power. Because every excuse is a small surrender. It says, I'm not in control, I'm not responsible, I'm not capable of changing this. And over time, that mindset becomes a barrier between you and the life you're capable of building. People respect those who take ownership. Not just of their successes, but especially of their missteps. It's easy to take credit when things go right. But true character is revealed in how you respond when things don't. When you stop blaming and start reflecting, something important happens. You begin to grow, you learn, you adapt. You become stronger, more self-aware, more resilient. And the world around you takes notice. Because nothing is more powerful than someone who can say, this was on me, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Excuses may protect your ego in the moment, but they weaken your influence in the long run. You may not see the damage right away, but others feel it. People stop trusting your words when they don't see follow-through. They stop believing in your potential when they see you avoiding responsibility. And more importantly, you stop believing in yourself. Because deep down, every time you make an excuse, you reinforce the idea that you are not in control of your own life. That you are at the mercy of circumstances, that your future depends on things outside your influence. And that belief quietly steals your motivation, your ambition, and your ability to lead yourself and others. Letting go of excuses is not about being hard on yourself. It's about being honest. It's about looking in the mirror and choosing to see both the mistakes and the power to change them. It's about holding yourself to a higher standard, not for perfection, but for progress. It's saying, I may have failed, but I won't hide from it. I'll face it, I'll learn from it, and I'll do better. When people see that in you, when they see someone who doesn't hide behind reasons or run from responsibility, they respect it. They respect the courage it takes to own your actions. They respect the discipline it takes to change course. And most of all, they respect the authenticity of someone who leads from a place of truth, not performance. If you want to grow, if you want to be trusted, if you want to be respected, start with yourself. Eliminate the excuses. Replace them with accountability. It won't always be comfortable, but it will always be worth it. Because the moment you stop making excuses is the moment you start making real change. And that's when respect begins to grow, not just from others, but from within.